The lock wouldn't take the key. He'd changed the cylinder without telling me a violation of the lease and the simplest way to keep me out of my own home. I twisted again and again, the dry sound echoing down the hallway at night. From inside came pounding music and shouts of laughter, so loud it felt like the whole building shook. Suddenly the door cracked open, light spilling out in a blinding glare. Caleb, the man I called my boyfriend, leaned against the frame, his smirk daring me. Surprised, sweetheart? This is my playground now. You don't have a key that works anymore. The apartment I paid rent for, once filled with the smell of morning coffee and soft golden light, had turned into a rowdy barroom, liquor soaking into the wood floors, cigarette smoke clinging to the brick walls. Caleb's friends whistled, slapped each other on the back, and hailed him as the king of downtown, as if he were the rightful owner. I stood adrift in my own home, shoulders jostled as people brushed past me without noticing. It was as though I had been erased from the very space that used to be mine. If they thought my presence meant nothing, then their contempt itself was the crack I could press against. Did they think this was a joke? I drew a deep breath, shoved Caleb's arm aside, and pushed my way in. The air hit me hard, alcohol, smoke, and the stench of cold pizza, sharp enough to turn my stomach. Laughter roared inside the apartment that once had been my refuge. The living room was wrecked. The leather sofa I had bought with my third paycheck was now a recliner for 3 men with poker cards, their feet propped on the coffee table I used to scrub every week. Empty beer glasses rolled on the wet floorboards. "Hey, she's here." One of them whistled, pointing at me. The leading lady of tonight's bet. The room erupted in laughter, shrill and mocking, tearing apart what dignity I still clung to. I frowned, confused, until another man slapped the table. Perfect timing. We just read the terms. If Caleb loses, he's out on the street. Right, King? I looked down. A stack of printed pages lay there, the bold header screaming, "Bet contract." The title loomed in all caps, and beneath it absurd lines twisted reality into something vile. If Caleb won, his friends would call him King of Downtown for 3 months straight. If he lost rights to the apartment and accepted being thrown out by his girlfriend. My blood boiled. This apartment wasn't Caleb's to gamble. I paid the rent every month, saved for years to afford it, and picked out every chair, every picture. Yet here it was, tossed like a poker chip. Caleb's smile had never repulsed me more. He waved his card, shouting, and tilted his head toward me. "Perfect timing, babe. They wanted you to see. Tonight I keep the crown. It's all fun." Fun. My voice cracked, drowned by laughter. "You bet the apartment." Oh, don't be dramatic," Caleb slurred, waving me off. "You know I always win. Besides, everyone here knows the apartment's mine." His friends chimed in, their cheap laughter egging him on. A younger guy even sneered. "Downtown's hero. Girlfriend's background, right?" The laughter surged again. My hands trembled, heart pounding. I wanted to throw them all out to end this circus. Instead, I drew a sharp breath, bit down on my lip, and forced my voice steady. "Caleb, do you remember whose name is on the lease?" The question silenced the room for a beat. Eyes darted, then nervous chuckles broke the pause. Caleb scoffed, shrugged. "Sure, it's yours. But what's the difference? Everyone here knows I'm the one in charge." His eyes glittered in neon light, not drunk but drunk on power. A friend, swaying with drink, leaned toward him. "Hey, if you lose, you really letting her kick you out?" The table shouted as one. "Kick him out, kick him out." In that suffocating moment, my eyes locked on the scattered pages. Bet contract glowed beneath the lamp. They treated my apartment like a toy, but I knew the truth. Every legal paper was in my desk drawer, with my clear signature. The louder they laughed, the clearer I saw it. What they despised most was exactly what I had, real control. I swallowed my anger, forcing a smile. "Fine," I said evenly. "Play. I'll sit right here and watch." Caleb arched a brow, convinced I'd surrendered. He raised his beer and shouted, "See, she's on board. I'm winning this one." Cheers roared again. Cards shuffled, chips clinked, and I studied every glance, every twitch. A man across the table whistled at Caleb. "Careful, King. Lose this and your bags are on the sidewalk by morning." The laughter exploded. I clenched my fists, nails cutting my palms. Amid the noise, I calculated. This was an opening. They had drawn the map for me to overturn the game. Caleb leaned back, laughing. Relax, guys. I never lose. And this apartment, he jerked his chin toward me, is always mine. Nobody touches it. He slammed his card down, bellowed with laughter, and suddenly slung his arm around me, dragging me into the crowd. His reek of liquor and cheap cologne mixed with smoke, suffocating me. He raised his voice above the music so all could hear. See? She lives off me. She's not going anywhere. Right, sweetheart? Sweetheart. The crowd roared, clapping, whistling, jeering, eyes on me as though I were a cheap spectacle. I didn't answer. I let Caleb laugh, let his friends howl. Each laugh I stored like a blade, proof of the humiliation they thought I'd swallow forever. Then, through the noise, came a faint whisper. Not music, not laughter. A voice soft but sharp enough for me to catch. Heard the leases in her name. I turned slightly, catching sight of a hesitant young man. He murmured to his friend, unaware I was close enough to hear. The friend scoffed, replying with mockery. Sure, but who believes that? Look around. This place revolves around Caleb. Their chuckles faded, but that first remark pierced through, a flash of light in the dark. The lease was in my name. I knew it, but hearing it from a stranger steadied my pulse. I lifted a glass of water, sipped, hiding the quiet smile tugging at my lips. Caleb didn't notice. He boasted on, see? She sits here obedient. No matter the yelling, tomorrow morning she'll still make my breakfast. Another voice chimed in, right. Caleb's a master at taming women. Never seen one stick around this long. The laughter rolled again. I stayed silent, but my mind spun faster than ever. That whisper, if I played it right, could seed something bigger than I had imagined. Caleb tugged me up, parading me around like a trophy. He lifted his beer and shouted, show everyone clearly, I control this apartment and this woman too. His friends roared, bottles clinking. I stared up at the flickering lights on the ceiling, everything around me seeming to slow. In their wild laughter, I felt myself detach, watching like a spectator from the outside. When Caleb turned back to the table to continue the game, I quietly sat in a chair near the window. Outside, the city lights blazed and cars kept flowing, unaware that high above, a woman was being turned into a joke inside her own apartment. I glanced around. Handprints stained the brick wall where they'd leaned drunk. The coffee table was littered with beer bottles and poker cards, and in the middle of all that chaos lay the bet contract papers, abandoned. I pictured the next morning Caleb losing the hand, his friends shoving him out the door while they chanted about me, treating me like a side character forced to follow their script. Kick the boyfriend out. But they didn't realize their little joke had already exposed its biggest flaw. I leaned back in the chair, brushed a strand of hair off my forehead. Caleb looked up, caught my gaze, and waved his hand. Smile, sweetheart. This is our party. I forced a thin smile and looked away. They mistook my stillness for surrender. In reality, I was listening to every word, every laugh, every slip they gave away. One guy shook his beer can, smirked at me, and sneered. Hey Caleb, rumor says this place isn't even in your name. How can you bet it? The noise dipped for a heartbeat, as though everyone was waiting for Caleb's reaction. He burst out laughing, slammed his card on the table, and shouted over the music, names on paper don't matter. Who controls the vibe here? Who makes people gather at this table? Me. The real owner isn't on the lease, it's whoever makes the room revolve around them. His friends howled as if Caleb had won another round. But I saw it, the brief flicker in his eyes, a tiny crack only I caught. I tilted my head, my gaze falling on the papers. In my mind, the pieces clicked. The lease, my name, the bills I paid, and this ridiculous game. That night, after Caleb's friends finally staggered out, the apartment reeked of spilled beer, cigarette smoke, and echoes of their laughter drifting down the hallway. I picked up a few empty cans, wiped the wet stains off the table enough to set my laptop down. Caleb sprawled on the sofa, still smirking in his sleep, dirty sneakers slung across the cushions like the place belonged to him alone. I walked slowly to the window, pulled the thin curtain closed. Streetlights cast a glow over the wreckage of the living room. I went back to the table and opened my laptop. I started with the simplest thing, the shared email account we used for a few utility bills. In seconds I filtered out the attachments Caleb always ignored. Electric, water, internet, every bill clearly showed my name. The high-speed internet he bragged to his friends about personally upgrading was in my contract. Paid by me every month. I scrolled past. Paid in full notices, remembering how he'd smirk and say, "Good thing I've got you too busy with bigger deals to handle this." Back then, it sounded like encouragement. Now it read like mockery. I saved each bill into a separate folder, naming it simply, Receipts. Every file was another cut into Caleb's swagger. Next I checked messages. Caleb believed I never noticed his phone because he used his own password. On our shared home laptop signed into the household Apple ID message previews had been syncing for months. I never guessed how much would be sitting there in plain sight. When hundreds of messages popped up, I held my breath and scrolled. There were the boasts he'd sent to his friends. Sweet apartment, costs me nothing. Utilities all on her. Total free ride, bro. Each line glowed on the screen like a blade slicing my chest. I saved them all, neatly stacked screenshots. Then I stopped at a more private text to one of his friends. She gave me the extra card. Swipe all you want. This week I'm grabbing new sneakers and that watch you saw in Vegas. The card I'd given him for emergencies had become his ticket to luxury junk. I pulled up the online statement, each transaction clear. Sneaker store, watch boutique, restaurant bills he'd called business dinners. I gathered everything, sorted by date and time. The clock hit 1 a.m. When I was nearly done, a new email notification popped up. Curious, I opened it. The message was brief, listing approved. Your property is now live on the site. Expected visitors this weekend. I frowned and clicked the link. A shadowy short-term rental site loaded. And there, unmistakable, my living room, gray sofa, the coffee table I'd bought at the thrift store featured in a row of photos. Posted by Caleb N. Wright. Weekly rate $800. I pushed back from the chair, heart hammering. He wasn't freeloading, spending my money to polish his image. Caleb was planning to rent out my apartment for his own pocket. A picture flashed in my head. Strangers with suitcases stepping inside, dropping their bags on my bed, scattering things on my table, while Caleb stood outside collecting cash as if it all belonged to him. The thought made me shiver. He wasn't ungrateful, he was reckless and greedy enough to sell out my refuge. I took screenshots of the website, saved the listing ID, and kept digging. The booking calendar showed gaps, meaning people had already inquired. I saw the payment account name, money flowing into a digital wallet not linked to his shared bank account. A clear slush fund. I sat frozen, hearing my heartbeat mix with the ticking wall clock. The sting of betrayal had hardened into cold clarity. Caleb thought he was playing the perfect hand. He had no idea every card was already in my grasp, waiting for me to flip them. I closed the laptop, set it neatly on the table. Beside it lay the bet contract they'd forgotten from the party. I glanced at it once more before turning off the light and quietly heading to the bedroom. Caleb lay there, breathing heavily, like a child worn out after play. I pulled the blanket over him, my lips curling not with tenderness, but because I knew, in the morning, everything would look the same. But in the dark, everything had shifted, and only I knew it. The next morning Caleb was still asleep, face buried in the pillow as if the world belonged to him. I stepped out with my sneakers already on, laptop in my bag. My heartbeat was steady, not rushed, but my mind was clear down to each step. There was one thing I knew I had to do before this went too far. Meet Mrs. Rodriguez. She owned the building, living on the ground floor in a small apartment with a balcony full of bougainvillea. She was past 60, short, with silver hair and eyes sharpened by years of weather. I'd carried groceries for her, chatted in the lobby. She liked me, saying, "You're tidy, polite, and never late on a payment." I rang the bell. A moment later she opened, wearing an old gray sweater, hands smelling of fresh coffee. "Oh, Sloan, so early, do you need something?" I pressed my lips together, lowered my voice. "I need a private word, if you have a few minutes." Her eyes flickered serious. She opened the door wide, gesturing. Come in, sit down. The living room was small but neat. Orchids and cacti lined the windowsill. Old family photos hung on the wall. I sat, gripping my bag straps. What's going on, Sloane? She asked, calm but clear. I hesitated. Telling everything would be too much. But saying nothing would leave me exposed. Finally, I chose a middle path. Do you remember the lease for apartment 5B? It's under my name, right? Of course. Since the day you moved in, you alone signed. I still have the original downstairs. Why? I drew a deep breath. I need a copy. It's complicated, but in short, Caleb, my boyfriend, is exploiting this. He tells his friends the apartment's his, even bragged about betting it. I'm afraid one day he'll turn that lie into something bigger. Mrs. Rodriguez frowned, but not in surprise. I've seen a few men like that. Loud, bragging, but always living off someone else. That apartment's not in his name, no rights at all. Everything's yours. A weight eased off my shoulders. Could you help me get a copy? So if something happens, I'll have proof. Wait here. Her footsteps creaked across old wood, then a file cabinet clicked open. I smelled old paper. Minutes later, she returned with a yellow folder. Here. She set it on the table, open to the first page. My signature stood bold, blue ink still sharp. No Caleb. Not a single line tying him to it. I looked at my own handwriting and felt a new certainty rise. Not ink. A boundary, proof no one could deny. Mrs. Rodriguez sat across from me, eyes steady. Do you have a plan? I know sometimes we want to believe in love, but paper doesn't lie. I can't share the details yet. But I promise whatever I do will be legal and won't trouble you or this building. I need to be sure that when the time comes, I have something solid to stand on. She nodded slightly. I believe you. You're different from the people I've seen here. If you need anything else, tell me. But remember, everything legal is already on your side. That sentence slid into my mind like a key fitting a lock. I folded the folder and tucked it carefully into my bag. On the way back to the apartment, every step felt steadier. The familiar hallway no longer pressed in on me. I knew Caleb was still asleep, but in that heavy sleep he had no idea that, one floor below, his little circus had been stripped bare by a few sheets of paper. I walked into the apartment. The smell of beer and cigarettes from the night before still clung to the air. Caleb snored loudly, one arm hanging off the floor, looking like someone spent after a game. I stood for a moment, watching him. Inside me there was no more love, not even pure hatred, only a cold, clear focus. I took out my laptop, opened the folder I'd saved the night before. Now everything was organized: bills, messages, credit card statements, and now the original lease copy. A complete file. Sitting before the glowing screen, I heard the clock ticking. Each sound marked how close I was to the moment truth would surface. Caleb still thought of himself as the king of downtown. But in the dark, with these notes and harmless-looking papers, I had my first weapon. Caleb left on Saturday afternoon, throwing on his new leather jacket and tossing back a careless line. Got plans with the guys. Probably late. Don't wait up. I nodded, smiling exactly like the compliant woman he believed I still was. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving the apartment wrapped in a heavy hush. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall before I rose slowly. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, streaking the messy floor with gold where beer cans from the last party still sat untouched. I inhaled deeply, then walked straight to the storage room at the end of the hallway. That small room was rarely opened. Caleb usually kept the key in the desk drawer. I'd quietly taken it long ago but had never used it. Today, with him roaming elsewhere, I decided it was time. The lock clicked dryly. I pushed the door, dust wafting out. Inside was dark, filled with the smell of old wood and damp fabric. I flipped on the light. A pale yellow glow fell across stacked cartons and old items I'd never seen Caleb touch. In the far corner sat a dark brown leather suitcase, too new to belong with the rest. I bent down, grabbed the handle. The combination lock was already undone. Caleb had never thought I'd be curious enough to look. When the lid opened, my eyes stopped on layers of glossy wrapping. Inside were gift boxes, watch boxes, jewelry boxes, shopping bags from luxury brands. I carefully lifted each one. All sealed, untouched. My heart sank. In 2 years of living together, Caleb had never given me anything beyond a cheap bouquet bought at the corner store. Yet here lay gifts any woman could guess the price of. I pulled out a sheet of wrapping. At the bottom of the suitcase was a stack of receipts, hurriedly folded but still legible. I unfolded them. The same recipient name repeated over and over. Hannah W. A name Caleb had never mentioned. The receipts listed a different address, not this apartment, but the billing address was mine. Caleb had used the extra card I'd given him to buy all of this for her. I sank onto the floor, papers scattered around me. Each lie began to string itself together: the hours Caleb disappeared, the emergency meetings, the business trips. I had wanted to believe, and he had known I would. I let out a low laugh. It rasped. In the small room, sounding off but sharp. He'd lived off me for free, using this apartment as his base. Worse, he'd used it to show Hannah he was a generous provider, boasting of a chic downtown apartment. In her eyes, he probably looked like a successful man. I picked up a small box, opened it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, light shimmering off it. I stared at it for a long moment, then placed it back, strangely calm. I gathered every receipt, stacked them neatly, then opened my laptop and photographed each one. The images went into a new folder named Hannah. Each file numbered by date, a link in the chain of evidence I was building. The ticking clock in the living room pressed at me, urging me on. I locked the suitcase, set it back in place, draped an old cloth over it. When the storage light clicked off, everything looked untouched again. Caleb thought I would always be his audience. He didn't know every act was being recorded, every small detail turning into a weapon. I organized the entire file. Receipts, credit card, lease, Hannah. 4 folders glowing like the first chess pieces on the board. I knew I'd need more, but the foundation was there. That night, Caleb returned close to midnight. The door swung open, he whistled cheerfully, reeking of alcohol. He tossed his jacket onto the chair, grinning. "The guys kept talking about you. Said I'm lucky to have someone like you. See, I'm not neglecting you like you think." I looked up, gave a thin smile. "Yeah, lucky." He didn't notice the tone. He never had. Caleb stretched, grabbed a beer from the fridge and flopped onto the sofa, launching into loud party stories. I nodded, murmured along, letting him believe I was still the good girlfriend he'd labeled me. Meanwhile, in my head, every name, place, and time he let slip was etched down, another puzzle piece for the picture I was quietly finishing. This apartment, every corner bore witness to Caleb's carelessness. But to me, each forgotten detail, each slip, was a marker on the road to the day he'd face the truth. I placed the new phone on the table, switched to incognito mode, making everything look casual. A fake profile had to breathe, not look like an amateur trick. I named the account Elliot Parker, chose a profile photo of a neat, short-haired traveler, the type who rents short-term apartments for work. The bio borrowed the tone of long-term business guests. Need a quiet, well-located place for 2 weeks, will care for the space. As I typed the description, my hand wavered. Not from fear of getting caught, but because I knew I was lifting a mask in front of someone I once trusted. But anger had cooled into resolve. My goal wasn't to shame him in front of his friends. It was to get a confession he'd never imagined giving to a stranger. The first message was ready. "Hi Caleb, saw your listing. Is the space available for next month? We're coming for a work trip, looking for a furnished loft downtown. Price seems right. Can you share details?" I sent it, my hand resting on the keyboard a second longer to feel my own breath. The living room door stayed open, evening light slipping through the curtains, laying gold strips on the wood like pieces of time. Less than 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Caleb replied almost instantly, cheerful. "Hey man. Absolutely. It's my place located in the Arts District, high ceilings, original brick. I put a lot into it. I'll send pics, lockbox code, everything. You guys will love it." I set the phone to high-quality recording, hid it between stacked books on the shelf. Mike pointed toward me. I sipped water, made small talk so he wouldn't suspect. Caleb sent photos of the living room, lo-fi shots with warm light, the sofa still dotted with beer stains from the night before but cropped to look nice. He started bragging about the space. "Yeah, it's mine, bro. I've put in work, new fixtures, custom lights, got the best neighbors. People pay top dollar to stay here on weekends." I steered the chat toward money, feigning surprise at the price. "You're offering a good price for downtown. Do you manage bookings yourself?" Caleb chuckled back by text. "Of course. I handle everything. I don't like third-party managers. Easy money. My girlfriend. She's basically my tenant. Pays the lease sometimes, but she doesn't worry about bookings. I do. I run the show." His voice on the recording sounded smug, boasting like it was an achievement. "She's basically my tenant." Those 4 words rang out like a private confession, a recording I knew would cut through every excuse later. Caleb sent more details about terms, payments, minimum nights, bragging he was booked for the next few weeks. I probed about deposits. "So, how do we secure the dates?" "Wire, PayPal." He answered quickly. "Venmo or cash, dude. I trust people. Keeps things simple." His ease made me laugh quietly. He believed he was smarter than he was, believed his tricks would never circle back. I saved the recording, then sent a few more polite lines to stretch the conversation so he'd brag more. When the chat ended, I didn't turn off the phone. Instead, I sat still, listening to the normal sounds of a downtown apartment, a backdrop now for a different kind of awakening. I played the recording, hearing Caleb's voice again. No explosion of emotion came, only a steely sense, like the ground had been laid for the plan. That night, I printed 2 copies of the transcript, one to keep safe, one to send if needed. I folded them neatly, slipped them into the last page of an old notebook, a secret between the covers. Not to feed rage, but so that justice, a simple, literal fairness, could be called by its name. The next morning, he showed no sign of suspicion. Caleb kept up his smug routine, bragging to his friends, praising himself, spinning every story to his manners, crown himself the winner. I listened to his laughter through the cracked door, pretending to be the woman who still believed, still adored. But the screenshots, the receipts, the careless spending, the recipient's name on those invoices, all of it had become sharp, undeniable cuts. I began weaving a small net around myself, slowly, carefully. Meeting Mrs. Rodriguez was the first step. Now I had to plan the next. Who I should talk to, who could act as a thread to let information slip out. And most importantly, how to make everything unfold without leaving Caleb a chance to cover it up. Caleb called me into the kitchen, voice bubbling with pride. "They loved it," said. "The rent's fair, the view's great. I think I've got my first guests coming next week." "Perfect. You handle it. I've got projects, I'll be in the studio all week." Yeah. "Don't worry. I've got it covered," he said, before turning back to his friends. While he patted shoulders and laughed, I adjusted my phone, recording a few more clips without anyone noticing. Not for cheap revenge, but to have evidence ready for a courtroom or any neutral ear that needed to hear. I wasn't after humiliation. I wanted truth. I had lived too long in false promises, and now, with his voice on tape and his lies in print, there was only one path left: to show people what was really happening, while keeping everything within the law, with dignity intact. In the following days, I posed as a curious renter again, asking about maintenance, cleaning services, extra fees, pushing him to talk more. Each answer was recorded, every admission another puzzle piece. Caleb grew casual, convinced he was chatting with a client, and unknowingly revealed his true self, a schemer, claiming more rights than responsibilities. One evening, bragging about his summer plan, weekly rentals for extra pocket cash, he laughed with his friends. I poured water, asked lightly, "Have you thought about cleaning after guests? Is there a good service?" He turned to me, caught off guard. "Oh, I've got that covered. I'm the host, not the real landlord, you know? I handle everything. You take care of something else." His words rang in my mind like a bell. I knew then the time was right to go further, but with care. Each step had to be measured. Recordings, receipts, screenshots, digital wallet addresses, everything lined up into a structure that could speak clearly when the time came. I didn't want fame from a loud spectacle. I wanted my autonomy back, my apartment back, the dignity of the things I owned. And I wanted Caleb to face what he had done. His line, "She's basically my tenant," would be one of the sharpest arrows. He said it when he thought no one was listening, and that made it real, more valuable than any baseless accusation. The game was only beginning. I knew each move from here had to be quieter, tighter. Caleb could be stubborn, even dangerous, in ways I hadn't imagined. But inside me there was clarity. From now on, every action would be a deliberate answer to his lies. I would use his own words, his own slips, to strip away the mask. And when the time came, the truth would be laid on the table, in light he couldn't hide from. Friday night, the familiar knock returned. Caleb had finished texting his group, and soon the usual faces poured in. Young men, shirts half-buttoned, beer cans in hand, swaggering in like it was their own den. I opened the door with a faint smile, then quietly returned to the sofa in the corner. This time, I wasn't leaving. Caleb's frown flickered when he saw me stay put, but he couldn't throw me out of my own apartment in front of his friends. So he chose to ignore me. I poured myself water, set the laptop on my lap, brushed my fingers over the phone. A small nanny cam recorded the poker table for my records. I didn't broadcast anything. Hours later, guests' own clips would surface on social media, and that would be more than enough. One viewer had spread the stream. Tracing it, I saw the signal came from inside the living room. One of Caleb's friends had copied the link. A rush of nerves and intrigue. I'd started this to keep evidence for myself. Now it had spread beyond these walls. I returned to the kitchen for water, eyes scanning. The noise raged on, but I noticed one man, quiet, glancing around, texting under the table. He was the link. Caleb thought he held the reins, but within his own circle, someone wasn't on his side. Maybe out of spite, maybe curiosity, maybe to see him fall. Whatever the reason, I had an invisible ally. At midnight, the game ended in shouts. Caleb lost a big hand but threw his head back laughing. Money's gone, but I've still got the apartment. And this sweet girlfriend. That means I win. His voice was sharp, filling the stifling room. I gripped the glass, cold water spilling. My face stayed calm. I knew now it wasn't only me witnessing this act. Other eyes had seen, other ears had heard. And once secrets spread beyond these walls, Caleb's power wasn't absolute anymore. I sat a few more minutes, watching the chaos, then slipped back to the bedroom. Inside me, the plan shifted into a new phase, a game board Caleb never imagined anyone else could play on. Caleb had never resisted the lure of parties. It was his stage, his proof of being on top. And I knew, if I wanted him to walk straight into the trap, there was no better place than this apartment, on a night he believed he was the true king. I prepared carefully, dropping casual hints. When he complained his friends wanted a place to go big, I shrugged. The apartment's spacious, nice view. If you want a party, it could work. His eyes lit up, like a drunk spotting a full glass. That was all it took. Caleb started texting, drawing up a guest list. This time I overheard a familiar name, Hannah. His voice gleamed. No. Attempt to hide. I'll show her. I can throw a real party. Don't worry, I'll handle it all. I smiled faintly, hiding the tremor in my chest. Instead of resisting or questioning, I nodded. The more Caleb believed I had accepted the role of the woman in the background, the deeper he would sink into my design. All week, I stayed in quiet contact with Mrs. Rodriguez. In her small ground floor office, I laid out the papers, the bills, the original lease before her. She nodded, eyes sharp yet sympathetic. Are you certain you want to do this? She asked, voice steady but heavy with years of experience. Yes, I answered, my hand gripping the edge of the paper. Not for me. If he keeps going, more people will be exploited. She was silent a long while, then placed her thin but firm hand over mine. I'll stand with you. On the night of the party, I'll come with security. The rest, let the paperwork speak. When the day came, the apartment turned into a noisy stage. Lights flashing, speakers thumping, groups of guests coming and going, plastic cups filled with liquor. I sat in a corner, wrapped in a thin cardigan, watching every move. Caleb stood out in the crowd. Shirt unbuttoned at the collar, flashing a wide grin, swinging a bottle of imported liquor. He drifted from group to group, showing off the apartment like he'd bought it himself. Look around, guys. Downtown loft, high ceilings, all mine. She's here. He jerked his chin toward me, but only like a tenant. Tonight, it's my show. Laughter echoed, music blared louder. I bit my lip, keeping my eyes steady. Inside, every boast only confirmed my choice was right. A little after 10, Hannah arrived. She wore a striking red dress, blonde hair curled lightly, lips painted to match. Caleb rushed to the door, arms wide, hugging her tight in plain view. I sat still, but my hand beneath the cardigan curled into a fist. Hannah giggled, letting him drape an arm around her. Wow, place looks amazing, she said, voice impressed. Caleb tilted his head. Of course. This is my loft. I keep it for special nights like this. Every word was caught by the tiny mic clipped inside my cardigan. The evidence was no longer in texts or receipts, it was alive, right here, in this party. At exactly 11, my phone buzzed, a short message from Mrs. Rodriguez, we're here. I stepped into the hall. My heart pounded, but my stride was firm. In the dim light, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with 2 building security guards. She wore a heavy coat, holding the folder we'd agreed on. Ready? She asked, voice low. Yes. We entered together, like a cold draft cutting through the noisy room. For a moment, music kept pounding, laughter kept rolling until heads began to turn toward the door. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice clear. Sorry to interrupt. I'm the owner of this building. I need everyone to stop for a moment. The music cut off. Silence fell, thick and startling. Caleb turned, a flash of panic in his eyes before he forced a smile. Oh, Mrs. Rodriguez, good to see you. We're having some fun. Don't worry, I've got it under control. I stepped forward, pulled the lease from my bag and spoke calmly. Actually, I'm the one in control. Here's the original lease. It's in my name. None of you are allowed here without my invitation. I handed the papers to Mrs. Rodriguez. She opened them, lifted them high under the lights. Signatures, dates, and my name gleamed clearly. A few whispers rippled. Hannah blinked, her face paling. One of Caleb's friends muttered, "Wait, so all this time?" Caleb forced a laugh, stretching his arms. Come on, technicalities. We live here together, so basically. No, Caleb, I cut in. Voice firm without shouting. You're a guest. And guests without an invitation must leave. His friends exchanged uneasy glances, some inching toward the works door. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded at the guards. They stepped forward, not threatening, but enough to shift the air. Caleb's face tried to stay bold, but sweat dotted his forehead. Hannah slipped her hand off his shoulder, eyes averted. In that moment, I knew, the boasting, the long charade Caleb built, had reached its end. He stood in the center, face red, clinging to his ego with strained laughter. Don't blow this up, Sloan, he said, hands raised toward me and Mrs. Rodriguez. Those papers. Formalities. Everyone knows I'm the one who made this place worth living. Without me, I didn't let him finish. I walked to the table where my laptop waited. With one tap, the big screen lit up, bathing the room in cold blue. Formalities. I said softly, loud enough for all. Then what about these words? The recording played, deep and clear. Caleb's voice, captured during his client exchange. It's mine. My girlfriend. She's basically my tenant. Gasps filled the room. A few laughed bitterly, some whistled. Hannah froze, eyes wide in disbelief. Caleb lunged for the laptop, but I stepped back, hand firm on the mouse. You haven't seen it all yet. I clicked again. The poker night livestream flickered across the screen, grainy footage, loud laughter, then Caleb's voice bragging. Even if I lose, I still win. She won't kick me out. The room erupted, this time with mocking laughter. Friends slapped each other's backs, phones raised to record. Murmurs spread fast. Is that real? God, he's stupid enough to get recorded? Caleb's face burned. That was a joke. You know how poker talk is. And this is a joke too. I cut him off, cold. I opened the Hannah folder. Receipts appeared, each line showing her name. Hannah W., watches, bracelets, handbags all bought on my supplementary card. For privacy, I redacted last names and any contact details. Hannah's face drained, her hand snapping back, like she'd touched fire. You bought these for me with her money? Caleb stammered, eyes darting. No, it was just, the card we shared. I didn't, enough. My voice sliced like a blade. You lived here without paying a cent. Utilities, internet, all in my name. You bragged use this apartment as your prop. And you lied to her too. Mrs. Rodriguez raised the lease with my signature. The truth is clear. You have no rights here. Under the lease and building rules, unauthorized guests must leave now. Security will escort anyone who refuses. And now I'm asking you to leave this apartment immediately. The friends who once cheered him now stayed silent. Then one snorted, phone raised. This is too good. I'm posting it. Let's see what the king of downtown says now. Mocking laughter rolled through. More phones lifted. Caleb spun, face flushed, voice cracking. You don't get it. This is my home, mine. No, Caleb. My voice was calm, steady. All you ever had was an illusion you built. And that illusion collapsed, right here. Hannah shook her head, stepping back. You lied to me. Said you were the provider, the owner. But you're nothing but a leech. Her words sent a shockwave through the room. Caleb bit his lip, eyes wild, but no excuses left. The guard stepped in, voices firm. You need to leave now. Otherwise, we'll call the police. He looked around desperately, searching for support. The faces that once called him king now showed only mockery or indifference. A few had already walked out, shaking their heads. He stumbled back, hands trembling. Sloan, you'll regret this. You can't do this to me. I said nothing. My gaze stayed locked, calm as stone. Caleb grabbed his fallen jacket, stomped out under the guard's watch. The door slammed, echoing in heavy silence. The crowd murmured, a few last laughs breaking out. One old friend muttered, he dug his own grave. I stood in the middle of the apartment, breathing deep, eyes sweeping over the room messy but filled with proof. The laptop screen still glowed, frozen on Caleb's smug grin, not knowing his own words would be the blade that ended him. The news didn't come from the press, but from social media itself, where short clips cut from Caleb's final party began to spread. At first, a few dozen views, a few curious comments. But somehow, the algorithm pushed that clip onto the local trending feed. In the video, Caleb stood in the middle of a crowded room, face flushed, arguing over the music. His voice rang out, she's basically my tenant. Then came the shot of me pulling out the lease, Mrs. Rodriguez confirming it, and the crowd erupting in laughter. A brief moment, but enough for people to give it a name. King of Downtown gets kicked out. I wasn't one to replay it, but sometimes it popped up while scrolling. The comments were endless, living off a woman and still bragging. Instant karma, deserved. That girl was fierce, one without even yelling. I skimmed, adding nothing. But I knew Caleb must have watched. And for him, that was the real punishment. Humiliation not from one person but from thousands of strangers. Hannah disappeared from his life faster than I expected. After that night, I heard whispers about the messages he sent her, pleading, explaining, even cursing. But Hannah never replied. An old friend of his, maybe wanting to stir things up, sent me a screenshot. Hannah's final line before blocking him. You have nothing I need. Friends drifted away too. The ones who once slapped his back and toasted him as king now stayed silent or turned him into a joke in group chats. One crueler friend even dropped the link with a caption. Here's the guy who said he'd rent a penthouse in Miami. Caleb tried to salvage what he could. He texted me, soft at first, Sloan, I know I messed up. Give me another chance, please. When I didn't respond, his tone shifted. You think you won? Nobody wants to be with someone cold like you. You'll regret this. But I never answered. The messages kept coming, then finally stopped. The apartment after the party looked like a battlefield. I spent a whole day cleaning, tossing cans, scrubbing beer off the floor, hauling bags of trash. While sweeping, I found Caleb's leather jacket, with a torn gym membership card in the pocket. I paused for a second, then dropped it into the bin. the last trace of him in that space. A week later, word spread that Caleb was crashing in a shabby suburban apartment borrowed from a friend. But even there, he wasn't safe. The landlord soon found out about the viral video, didn't want the trouble, and quietly pushed him out. He lost his second roof in days. His reputation was gone too. At the bar where he once held court, people now smirked when he walked in. Someone told me a former friend whistled, "Hey, the king of downtown's here." The whole group laughed. Caleb left with his head down. The game he thought unwinnable using my apartment as his pawn, his lies as strategy ended with nothing. No home, no girlfriend, no friends. Only a name tied to a humiliating video, shared again and again. The noisy laughter, the shuffle of cards, the hiss of beer cans, all of it faded into the past. What remained was the faint whistle of wind through a window crack, and the rustle of street leaves. I moved into a new apartment one crisp Saturday morning in early fall. The moving truck turned onto a quiet street where maples were changing color, leaves crunching underfoot. The apartment was smaller than the one I'd shared with Caleb, but standing before the sunlit window, I knew I'd chosen right. No more walls stained with jeers or beer cans rolling after parties, an empty space for me to fill with my own breath. I rolled out a new rug, set a small wooden table by the workhouse window. The few things I'd kept after the messy cleanup, I arranged carefully: a couple of old books, a family photo, the turquoise armchair I'd wanted since college. Small, simple, but all mine, paid for and placed by me. Every corner whispered, "This space truly belongs to me." That first night, I lay in the new bed, listening to the wind move through the curtains, feeling peace wrap around me. No more waiting for the rattle of a key or some hollow excuse. The stillness, some might call lonely, was to me a gift. In the weeks after, I built new routines. Mornings running in the park, afternoons working with design clients, evenings brewing tea and reading. Slowly, I realized the deepest wound wasn't Caleb, it was how I'd ignored my own needs to keep a hollow relationship alive. That realization sparked an idea: to share my story, not as tragedy but as a lesson. So one evening, I opened my laptop, created a small channel, and began recording simple videos. I spoke about budgeting while living alone, spotting financial red flags in relationships, keeping control when someone tries to exploit you. Not flashy, not dramatic, just me, in a lit room, sharing what I'd lived and learned. At first I thought no one would care. But views trickled in, then comments. Many, especially women, left notes: "Thank you for saying what I went through but couldn't admit." Another wrote, "Hearing you makes me feel less alone." One night, among the messages, I got an email. The sender signed as Lauren. It was short, but I stared at it for a long time. "Hi Sloan, I'm Hannah's friend. She said what you did opened her eyes. I also watched your video. I want to thank you for speaking up. Maybe to you it was self-protection, but to others it's a wake-up call. You've helped more people than you know." The screen's glow lit my face as a strange warmth spread inside me. I'd only thought of freeing myself, reclaiming the apartment, finding peace. I hadn't imagined it could reach others, helping them step out of their own traps. The next day, walking past the cafe near home, I noticed the chalkboard out front. The quote read, "Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life." I read it again and again, feeling it answer everything. This small apartment, those simple videos, those honest shares, just small steps. Yet each one had carried me out of the dark. When I filmed new videos now, I didn't feel I was speaking only to myself. I thought of Lauren, of Hannah, of all those who left comments saying they'd been where I was. My voice grew steadier, my gaze firmer. Once, a middle-aged man commented, "I watched this with my daughter. She's 19, and I want her to know that if someone exploits her, it's not her fault. Thank you for speaking up." A year later, I returned to the old cafe where Caleb once bragged loudly about fake triumphs. The space looked the same: wooden tables, warm yellow lights, but the air felt different, no longer heavy with lies. I chose a small corner table, set down my bag, and ordered a cappuccino. While waiting, I opened my notebook, its pages full of ideas for upcoming videos. Since starting, my small channel had gained thousands of followers. Letters, emails, Even in-person thank yous had poured in. I'd never imagined my bitter experience could light the way for others. At the next table, I overheard whispers. Someone mentioned my name, as if I were a character from a well-known story. A young woman said softly, "That's her. The one who stood up at the party and blew the whole act open." An older woman replied, half admiring, half moved, "I've watched that clip at least 3 times. Honestly, it reminded me of my youth, when I let people walk all over me without fighting back. She did what I couldn't." I heard, but didn't turn. I sipped my coffee, the bittersweet taste warming me, and smiled, faintly. Not from pride or vanity, but from knowing this wasn't about Caleb's downfall anymore. My story had become a mirror, showing women they deserved more than what they were settling for. In memory, I still saw Caleb's eyes that night, the look of someone tasting total loss for the first time. But it no longer shook me. It was a faded scar reminding me where I'd been. And from that scar, I'd built strength. A young man near the door came over, nervous. "Excuse me, are you Sloan? I follow your channel. My mom watches too," she said. "Thanks to you, she finally ended a toxic relationship that lasted years." I was surprised, then nodded. "Thank you for telling me. Sometimes we can't imagine how one small act touches another life." He smiled awkwardly, then left. I sat for a long while, listening to spoons stir coffee, voices hum, and realized, this was the sweetest revenge. Not Caleb humiliated, not a viral video wrecking his name, but turning my fall into a ladder for others. I lifted the cup, breathed deeply. The light from outside fell across my face, reflecting in the cafe mirror. In it, I no longer saw the woman who once trembled under mocking laughter. I saw someone walking steady, needing no one's approval but her own. Behind me, conversation continued, someone repeating "King of Downtown" with a scoff. I didn't turn. I didn't need to know where Caleb was now. The truth was, he'd made himself into an old story. And I was writing a new chapter where shame became strength, and wounds bloomed. The coffee dwindled, warmth seeping into my fingers. I told myself, victory isn't watching someone else collapse. It's standing up strong and calm, so others can look and believe they can too. Maybe everyone hearing this will ask themselves, if faced with what I went through, would they stay silent or dare to flip the game? The answer isn't simple. It touches pride, self-worth in any relationship. My story doesn't end with Caleb. It's a reminder for anyone who's ever felt small in their own home. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is turning hurt into strength and living a life worth more. What do you think? If it were you, how would you face it, finding out the one you loved was exploiting you? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because every shared word builds a circle of empathy so someone, somewhere, no longer feels alone. And if you want to keep hearing stories that touch the deepest corners of family life where pain and betrayal live, but so do strength and rebirth, follow the channel so you don't miss what's next. Who knows? Maybe one story ahead will let you find yourself in it.